You're listening to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Here you'll gain tools to lead proactively, conquer overwhelm, and revitalize your law enforcement teams and your agency.
We're your hosts, Michael and Kathy McIntosh. Mike is a retired sheriff and current division chief in the Denver metro area with nearly 40 years of law enforcement experience.
Kathy is a business and branding expert and a longtime law enforcement wife with a unique perspective on the human side of law enforcement.
Together, we share a powerful blend of practical experience and insightful roadmaps to help you elevate your call to service. Welcome back. Today, we are pleased to welcome a special guest, Abigail Tucker. She is a board-certified police and public safety psychologist. She is committed to solidifying behavioral health as healthcare and promoting change that enhances the lives of people and their communities. Abigail is the co-founder of Heroes Active Bystander. Thank you for joining us, Abigail.
Thank you for having me.
I was hoping that you could tell us, most of our listeners may already know this, but what is active bystandership? Let's just start there.
I'm so glad you asked. And actually, I was just training this week with law enforcement officers, and I asked day one, who here knows what active bystandership? And maybe one or two hands went up, and we had one of our attendees share with us that she didn't know what it was. She heard that it was training on how to prevent harm, which it is. So active bystandership, I don't think is a commonly used phrase in public safety, but I'm hoping that that changes. So active bystandership is really the skill that helps us intervene when we see harm occurring. Ultimately, we know from psychology that it's easier said than done to intervene when we see harm happening, and active bystandership are the skills that we develop and practice so that we don't get in our own way when our intention is, of course, to prevent harm, which is, of course, what all of public safety leaders are about.
And this really happens in the moment when you're in the heat of that anger or passion or in danger of exploding and doing things that you're not proud of later. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we often talk about in our trainings is that I believe that active bystandership is a perishable skill. So law enforcement leaders will be familiar with that term, meaning that it's a skill that can die on the vine if you don't keep practicing. And just like other skills that they use in the moment in a crisis, we want them to train. So we do role play trainings, lots of interactive options, because it really is a real-time intervention when harm is occurring. And Kathy, you're absolutely right that, of course, we want it to prevent misconduct. And we know that it can be helpful to certainly, interrupt when we see emotional escalation happening. But one of the, I think, secrets I would offer about active bystandership when it starts to become a culture is that it can be used even in those moments that don't feel so heated. It can be used when we see a colleague who's not showing up as their best selves to work, when we see slow deterioration of health and wellness, when we see just mistakes that can sometimes be costly. So hopefully it's being used, you're 100% right, in real time. But there's those options to use it in the crisis as well as really in that proactive measure when the heat isn't on, the cameras are off, and we're all just trying to do our best every single day.
Yeah, there's a real when you look at the framework, and I've had the fortune of actually training with you and being a part of both the ABLE program and the Heroes program, and we'll unpack that a little bit more, but there's that sense that if we can intervene really early on, we either actually prevent harm from ever occurring, or the harm that occurs is so less intense or severe than it would have been had we not taken an action when we took it.
Well, I would agree to that. I often think about the paradox of prevention when it comes to active bystandership. You don't get it's the opportunities where harm didn't occur. There's not a big fanfare. There's not a ticker tape parade, but there I can't think of a single public safety agency that I work with that really wants a whole lot of media attention for their mistakes and for those down moments. And so I would much rather align by a training with public safety cultures to build that harm prevention culture and let the acknowledgement come from within, because we're recognizing the good work that's happening every single day.
And when we start looking at, there might be the term able, or at least there's a lot of law enforcement agencies that have brought able into their organization, and now there's heroes. Can you just kind of talk about um, able and heroes, and what the difference is, and also about the similarity that exists between that, and kind of the partnership that exists between the two.
Yeah, I would love to. And certainly ABLE has really blanketed, and ABLE stands for Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. And ABLE has really blanketed the majority of law enforcement police agencies throughout the United States, coast to coast, and in Canada. Our public safety friends in Canada are joining with us in this culture shift. And ABLE really actually has its roots back to New Orleans Police Department. So the New Orleans Police Department was under consent decree. And it's a really great example of a value that's very important in both ABLE and Heroes. And that's, my psychologist phrase is, it's the both and. So this training and program is really about what's best for officers, public safety leaders and their agencies, and what's best for their community. And so while New Orleans was under consent decree, they brought together advocates, attorneys, certainly members from the police department, as well as the federal monitor, who was Jonathan Aroney, who was the federal monitor assigned. And they started brainstorming and really unearthed this reality that I presume that many, or at least I hear that many public safety agencies can relate to, which is there was this group of folks that they felt like they were constantly chasing harms occurring instead of proactively getting ahead of it. And the advocates and the attorneys shared, we don't want to keep suing departments. What we want is, we want the harm to stop. And so they co-created this training, and then that really became a program whereby New Orleans Police Department, and the program that they designed was called EPIC, Ethical Policing is Courageous. And their design was to really make sure that officers had the skills that they needed to intervene and prevent harm. It's been very successful. And like most police agencies we know, they shared their success. They were sharing their program and curriculum with departments across the country, but they did not have the bandwidth to keep up with the national interest for this program. And so it ended up then getting pulled in by support from Shepherd Mullen Law Firm into Georgetown Law. And that's currently where the ABLE program resides. And then that's when they shifted to ABLE, Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement, and really taking it kind of across the country in that sense. And I would say, let's see, because I started working with ABLE in January 2021. And it was later that spring that I learned through my friends and partners at ABLE that they made a really strategic decision to focus only on law enforcement, so patrol-based law enforcement. And I certainly respect their decision to maintain integrity to the cohort who helped them develop it coming out of a police department. But as certainly you know, Michael, my roots are in sheriff's offices. And for anybody who works in a sheriff's office, you know that if you don't attend to the jail-based needs, you're not attending to the whole organization. And so in partnership with ABLE, myself and my co-founders, Joel DeVoskin and Karen Collins-Rice, founded Heroes Active Bystandership program, really bringing that training, that program to the whole continuum of public safety. So police is handled by ABLE, but in Heroes, we in partnership for jails, corrections, EMS, fire and rescue, and dispatch.
Yeah, and really there's a lot of obviously similarities between the two programs, and even to the extent that we now have national instructors that that actually teach both, right?
Correct. Yeah. And just to build off of that, the tenets of both the ABLE and the Heroes curriculum really come from the research of Dr. Irvin Stowe, who's a world-renowned researcher on the social psychology about why people either work to prevent harm, or also he's done a fair amount of research on why people harm others. And he has really dedicated his career to and his research to helping elevate humans to learn why they might not intervene and how they can learn to do so. And so the tenets are incredibly similar between ABLE and Heroes because they're based on the same research. They're based on the same social psychology that says, I might be a very intended person who wants to prevent harm, but there are elements around when I'm around other people, such as I might think that somebody else is going to do it if I'm in a group of people, or I might be really stressed out and I don't even see the harm occurring. And so there's all these very understandable human reasons why we don't intervene. And the ABLE and the Heroes curriculum are built off those tenets to certainly prevent misconduct, but also reduce mistakes and to promote health and wellness. And certainly my experience says that when you invest in the health and wellness of your public safety workforce, you are going to start reducing mistakes and prevent misconduct. I just don't believe that people enter this field with anything but good intentions, but it's a tough job. It takes its toll. And this is really a training that helps leverage having each other's backs in a way so that everybody goes home safely, but also that they get to the end of their career with everything that they want, and as well as the impact that we know can happen in more families. So the similarities are really ultimately about the psychology that it's based on and the intention and the values to prevent harm and use the power of peer intervention. We know that in public safety, people want to have each other's backs. So we build on that existing strength in this workforce to say, hey, here's another tool in your toolbox to make sure that you have your partner's backs.
I love that so much. And I feel like we talked beforehand about how this conversation for our podcast and our leadership program kind of falls within the wellness category, the wellness module. And what reassurance it would bring to me if I were in that field, knowing that on a day when I am this close to losing my cool, sometimes I wish there should be active parent bystandering, right? Bystandership. So when I'm this close to just losing my cool, I've got somebody in my corner who I've given permission to speak freely, to intervene, to stop me, to pull me aside and say, let me take it from here. And how that can escalate just a feeling of safety and security and trust among your coworkers and in your work environment. What a beautiful thing. I love everything I'm learning here today. It's awesome.
Well, you just perfectly captured too the magic of it. And I really, in listening to you, Kathy, it's not just the magic of active bystandership to prevent harm, but when we build cultures that you talked about, I forget exactly how you phrased it, but the word that comes to mind for me is the power of permission. So, we all work in high stress environments, and the power of me saying to somebody that I work with every single day, hey, I don't want to make this assumption, but if I'm messing up, will you please step in so that I don't lose my job on any given day? So that's huge. And I think the other thing you highlighted that's critically important is that active bystandership presumes that people are well-intended. It presumes that we all want to do well. And it presumes that, however, we are all still humans and we make mistakes. And so is a really big, important point to say that active bystandership isn't about shaming or blaming people who do not intervene. And it's also not about focusing on, my air quotes here, the wrongdoer. I actually just got an email from a newly minted cross-trained ABLE and Heroes sheriff's sergeant who just got trained this week and then was looking at the police one beat and sent me the link. And I think her exact phrase was basically to the effect of, now that I've been through this training, I see these unfortunate events completely differently. And so in this video clip, there is a very unfortunate event of a law enforcement officer engaging in what will likely be misconduct. He's certainly already been removed from his position in the job. And our society tends to focus on the wrongdoer and focus on the harm. And there's value in that. There's value in learning from that. But when we stay focused there and we don't step back and we don't look at the opportunities that were missed to prevent that harm, we set ourselves up to repeat the same harm again and again. And so creating this culture, it not only gives permission to intervene, but it sets a standard that says we are all going to make mistakes. And when we proactively intervene on each other, we can prevent those really dreadful harms occurring, the ones that land us on the news and have people losing their jobs. And certainly we don't need any less qualified people in this work. We need more. And so we need to do everything we can to make sure that we're investing in our workforce and giving them the skills they need every single day.
Mm. That's so good. So good.
So
you mentioned, oh, sorry, Mike.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, you have to interrupt me because I could talk about this passionately forever. But something else you stated that I wanted to comment on, Kathy, is that you said at the beginning, if I were in this workforce, and I myself, I'm not a law enforcement officer. I sort of work with and alongside public safety quite a bit. So I can relate to putting myself in another person's shoes. But I also just really want to highlight that we have to, I think, speak very honestly about the families. And so certainly, that perspective, I think, is incredibly valuable. I was, recently at a CIT graduation, and there were family members there. And it was this wonderful opportunity to have these family members see their loved ones being celebrated and being honored for the good work that they do. They don't get enough of those opportunities. And I'd like to see where active bystandership can start reducing some of the drain of constantly reacting to harm occurring and building a more proactive, healthy workforce so we can build up those opportunities for families to, feel more confidently that, hey, when I'm not with my loved one, I know that they're working in a department that has each other's backs in a way that I can take heart in as a family member, as a loved one, because that's huge, that the trust that family members instill in law enforcement agencies when their loved ones go to work is huge. And I think there's a responsibility there to those families just as much to the workforce to say, what can I do to make sure that I as a leader can't be on every shift, in every corner, in every squad car, in every break room? How do I leverage my entire workforce to have each other's backs, even when it means having uncomfortable conversations?
And that's I'm glad that you touched really on that I as a leader perspective of it, because I think about, you know like has been mentioned, I have an opportunity to be in the classroom and instruct others to actually become trainers in this, and I get to actually see at some point that aha moment for them, and sometimes it's in the morning, sometimes it's in the afternoon, but it always seems to happen that there's this shift in their mindset as to, okay, I really get and understand why this is so critically important. That's in a classroom. It's in a setting. It's as we're going through the curriculum. What are 2 or 3 things that we can do so that we get the attention of the law enforcement executive, of the law enforcement leader, to want to bring it to their organization, and even more so to understand the significant impact of having all of their employees trained in this, what those benefits are for our organization and for the community that we serve.
Yeah, thank you. I'm first of all, I'm just thinking about, you and I were just teaching together this week, and it's like a drug. When people get that, when they have that aha moment, you just want to keep going. You want to keep
Yeah.
training, keep the momentum going, because it's exciting. People start to have this, it sort of active bystandership goggles. It takes a whole new framework on how you learn. So what I would encourage leaders to think about, I would actually encourage maybe a process in addition for the why. And so the process, I would actually have them start by just reflecting on, in their own career, where were there times that they witnessed harm and they didn't intervene? And I don't say that because I want people to go in some shame and blame spiral. I say that because I know for a fact that insight is on the pathway to behavioral change. And when we take time to really reflect that even I, in my position now as leader, here were opportunities where I potentially witnessed harm in my career and I didn't intervene. And specifically to reflect on why you didn't intervene, because it's so much easier to Monday morning quarterback and look back on an incident and say, oh, well, they should have stepped in. They should have tapped somebody out. They should have intervened on this person far before it got so escalated. But when you reflect on your own experience, hopefully it brings up a mixture of here's some insight and awareness as to why I didn't intervene. And using that, I would recommend that leaders then think about, and why would that then be important to make sure that their workforce has differently? In other words, how do they give their workforce a different tool in the tool belt? And I think this is an important time to also talk about for leaders, what are the programs and the policies and the initiatives that your department is taking that you believe in, you're aligned in, you think it's good for your department, good for the community, but they are not taking off. And that you feel as if you're putting good after bad and you constantly try to sort of mandate down this new expectation. And I would offer that an active bystandership culture that leverages everybody from the top down and the bottom up and outside in and inside out. And so I think of health and wellness, to go back, Kathy, to your point as well, I couldn't agree more. It's really exciting, having been in this career now for quite a long time, to see how many health and wellness options there are. I mean, there's apps, there's peer support teams, there's programs, there's EAP, there's new technology happening every single day as far as biofeedback and EMDR. But at the end of the day, I don't know if leaders can relate to this. If your workforce isn't using them, then they are not helping. So if you have a workforce that's not utilizing the services to the degree that they need, then they're not best serving your agency. And I would offer that active bystandership is sort of like a operating lever behind those health and wellness resources, so that, again, you as a leader don't have to be at every platoon, at every roll call, at every single shift to say, hey, please use these resources. And your whole workforce does not have to be trained to be peer support. That's not everybody's jam, but everybody in your workforce can be trained in active bystandership to see that harm is occurring. I see a colleague whose health and wellness is deteriorating, intervene simply to say, do you know about these resources that exist in our agency? It's that simple. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated, but one of the things that active bystandership does is it gives all of us the permission and the skills and the culture to intervene, because specifically with health and wellness, one of the social psychology terms that we train about is called diffusion of responsibility. It's a fancy way of saying somebody else is going to do it. And I think that this one is huge when it comes to health and wellness. Everybody thinks that somebody else is going to talk to Michael, who everybody is watching is on this downward spiral, right? And when we know that that might be happening, we're probably more likely to intervene and say, hey, Michael, you don't seem like yourself. You don't have to talk to me about it, but you should probably get some help before you end up making mistakes that then cost you your career. Anything that we can leverage from that. So I think having leaders sit in the leadership humility to reflect on when have I not intervened, and making that real and reflecting on the fact that it's easier said than done. That for me highlights why you need to train and why you need to build cultures. It's not as easy as just having a duty to intercede policy. Everybody should have one of those, but it's, in my opinion, unacceptable to have a policy that says that you should intervene and then not train anybody on how to do it. Of course, it's easy for me to say that. I know from the psychology that it's hard to do. So that would be one. And the other one is having leaders in this day and age in law enforcement, leadership who is not on a mission for the health and wellness of their workforce are going to continuously not understand why they're not having the outcomes they want, and why they're losing their workforce faster than they can keep it. And I would offer that active bystandership gives you another lever to pull to help make that mission for wellness consistent.
One of the things that you touched on And I think about the now there's a state law that we have a duty to intervene. In law enforcement, we have a duty to intervene. And once again, not is this just a policy, but this is a state law that carries some pretty heavy consequences with it if we don't intervene. And once again, are we teaching people, instructing people how to intervene, giving them the tools to intervene, and really giving them understanding around what that looks like? And maybe even some of those inhibitors or those obstacles that get in the way that kind of keep us from intervening. Diffusion of responsibility comes to mind. And in law enforcement, I see, and as I've reflected before, at times, when I was a deputy sheriff and didn't intervene, sometimes there was that rank structure that it's like, who am I to tell the sergeant, or who am I to tell the lieutenant that their actions, or actually just get in the middle of and intervene and keep them from causing harm. That when I grew up, the culture that I grew up in the late 80s, that was not something that was done. And it really is. And it's one of the things that I love about the Heroes cornerstones is there's that cornerstone that talks about changing that culture and creating a kind of that health and wellness culture, right? Or a culture where we're not um, having misconduct, and that we're working to prevent that, and really looking to reduce mistakes. It's it's so critical to our profession that we give these tools to those that are out on the front lines, whether it's on the jail floor or it's out on the street, or our emergency responders from EMS, because they're all looking at and they're all dealing with a lot of the same situations.
You couldn't be more right about that. And rank structure is specifically unique. Active bystandership is for all humans, but rank structure is one of those unique inhibitors that I certainly observe in public safety. And we certainly in both Able and Heroes really, we name that for starters, and we talk about the research that supports that it's real, that that is a very real inhibitor to why people don't intervene. And we then give them specific skills for how to overcome that. Because going back to your point, so in Colorado, we have Senate Bill 217, right, which clearly outlines that duty to intervene. And every state, I observe, most states have something very similar. And if you don't, you can look at the DOJ standard. The Department of Justice has a standard in their use of force policy that talks about a duty to intervene. And there is a note in the DOJ standard as well about training. It's not directly connected, but they're within the same policy. I would certainly encourage people to read it because I think it's informative, right? To know on that national level, and then what exists for you in the state level. But then back to your point, to your agency, I hope that your listeners walk away with knowledge that intervening is easier said than done. And so if you have a policy that says you are expecting people to intervene when they see harm occurring, I'm pretty sure that policy doesn't say, oh, but not if it's the captain. Oh, no, but not if it's the deputy chief, right? It says all staff in any situations, you're expecting them to intervene. I really want your listeners to walk away with, and what skills, training, and intentional culture are you building that gives them what they need in order to do that, whether it's in crisis, whether it is with somebody they have no relationship with, somebody they've worked with for years, or somebody in leadership. Because I mentioned earlier how I believe that people want to do well and people enter this field of work because they want to do well. And I believe the same for law enforcement leaders. I think I would argue that many leaders can relate to having made mistakes and no one intervened on them because they were a leader, and it doesn't feel good. Right? And you get promoted and then all of a sudden people stop talking to you, right? Or they don't talk to you real anymore, right? Or that buddy of yours that used to pull you aside and say, hey, knock it off, suddenly is like, yes, sir. And so we know that that's real. And how do we build a culture? And of course, one of the things you and I have certainly witnessed when we've trained together in this is we break the ice. We expect a lot of resistance and skepticism when people start the training. It's completely normal. And we often hear that this is the snitch class. And I really love when people just say that out loud, because then it allows us to really unpack that myth and really clarify that active bystandership is not about snitching. It is not about disrespect. You don't throw your rank structure out the door just because you're an active bystandership culture. It's another tool that allows us to work together as a team. And again, presuming that we're all not at our best. So I think that, that would be another takeaway that I would want leaders to understand, is that you need training and insight and awareness in that culture if you want your workforce to be intervening when it matters most. And I would offer that certainly here in Colorado, the case law for Senate Bill 217 is very minimal. I know that there was a huge concern around that, and certainly there was a lot of fears at the time when it was rolled out. But the case law application of duty to intervene has been, last time I checked, it was under 4. I think it might have only been 3 or 4 examples in the state since then. And what I would offer is that what I would say to leaders, that those should not be the drivers. I can understand that we are all heart committed to not wanting those tragic outcomes in our department for our workforce. And you have people who are suffering every single day, whether or not their health and wellness is deteriorating, whether or not they're making mistakes. And I would also offer that when officers witness harm that could have been prevented, that can result in moral injury. There's a lot of moral injury in the work of public safety as it exists. And so what we don't want to do is be adding to that by not giving them the skills they need to intervene. It could even be simply as a matter of intervening on those smaller things that are not likely to make the news or get us into IA, but absolutely are likely to build burnout, disengagement, and fatigue in the workforce. And certainly law enforcement leaders need every tool in their toolbox to prevent against those outcomes as well.
Absolutely.
Abigail, I'm curious if you can tell our listeners how to reach out to you, how to get started with training for their own agency. And then my second question is, are there any resources, books, other resources that are available that they can start digging into and reading more about this?
Yes, Kathy, thank you. And I would actually say that's probably step 1, is learn more about it, because the more you learn, the more interested you'll be in any training that's being offered. So certainly you can go to Able Active Bystandership for law enforcement to their website, or you can go to Heroes Active Bystandership Training, and I can send you the links for those. But you can go to both of those websites. Are great places to learn more to those trainings. On the Heroes website, if we contact us, I'll certainly be notified, but I'm happy to supply my email as well. And I'm on LinkedIn, and I would love to talk to other leaders about how they see us building this movement and momentum across all of public safety. But yeah, I could go on and on and on. So I'll leave you with just 3. If you like videos, Dr. Catherine Sanderson did a TED Talk on actually active bystandership in a college setting. But it's a really well done. And she's a well-respected psychologist and has written a book called Why We Act. So her TED Talk and her book are fantastic. And Dr. Irvin Staub has written a book called The Roots of Good and Evil. It's a fantastic book to really learn more about kind of why people, I would like people to read that and learn about how they can become active bystanders as well. And if you go to the Heroes website, I'm pretty sure it's under the trainings link. If you go to that section, there are a litany of podcasts and webinars and articles that people can read. But yeah, I would definitely encourage people just start learning more.
So good. We are unfortunately out of time. We would love to have you back, Abigail, because I know you have so much more to talk. I have so many more questions. But I want to thank you for being here. It's been an amazing conversation. I will put those links in our show notes so people can find them at leleaders.com/elevate. And we just know that you're changing the world and applaud you for that, and all the great work that you're doing. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Abigail.
Ready to build a stronger team, improve your reputation, strengthen officer safety, and recruit top talent? Visit us at leleaders.com and schedule a call with us today. We'd love to discuss how our coaching programs, workshops, and keynote addresses can help you build proactive leaders in a reactive profession.
In the meantime, if you like what you've heard today, we'd love your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.